Welcome to the Relationship Recovery Podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way.
Hello, and thank you for being here. I'm so excited for this interview. Before we dive in, I wanted to give a few reminders about how you can find me, how you can connect with me, and what resources are out there. Recently, I've been receiving so many emails, Instagram DMs, and messages about either new resources, different podcasts, and I love hearing from you. So please continue to do that. My email is jessica@jessicaknightcoaching.com. I purposely use that email so that you're not emailing somebody under jessica@emotionalabusecoach.com in case somebody is checking your emails, but you can DM me at emotionalabusecoach.com. There are a few offerings that I would like to just clarify. I have a boundaries deep dive for $19 available on my website, emotionalabusecoach.com, as well as the relationship recovery program that includes a free validation call, which means that you and I will have a one-on-one either during the course or after the course. It's at a time that you can choose is best for you, but it's to support you and validate you and help you and give you tools to move forward. I'm also working on a no contact deep dive to help you understand the point of no contact, how you can lean into no contact, and to support you along the way. That will be available on my website as well, emotionalabusecoach.com. If you ever need support, have questions, want to work with me one-on-one, you can always reach out to me. And if I can't answer your question in a simple email or a DM, I will tell you that, and maybe we can jump on the call. So I'll leave that there. I have a very special guest today, Rossana Faye, who you might know as Rollercoaster of Love on Instagram, TikTok, and other social media platforms. I found Rossana because I thought her content was funny. She brings humor and lightness to this very complex topic of narcissistic abuse. And I found her content just very engaging. You know, we can go around and listen to more serious content, but then every once in a while we do need a break from that, I think. And we need something that's like bright and light and funny so we can hear a message in a different way. So even though her content might be on the lighter side, it's still a very heavy message that she is portraying in her own way. And I love her authenticity. Rossana and I had a very authentic conversation. I absolutely love talking to her. I hope she'll come back after this and talk to us further. But we talk through the red flags of narcissistic abuse. We talk about what you might be experiencing. We talk about what to look for in the other person and just how you can begin to heal as you move forward. There are so many good nuggets in this podcast. I definitely recommend listening to it with a pen and a piece of paper and writing some things down. You can find her on rollercoasteroflove.ca and on social media under _rollercoaster of love. Hi, Ro. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi. Hello.
Can you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Rossana Faye, and a lot of people call me Ro. And I am a narcissistic abuse survivor of over 15 plus years. And I say that because I was with someone for 14 years and still healing through the process afterwards. And I talk a lot about post-separation abuse. I talk a lot about healing from narcissistic abuse. And I'm a certified life and relationship coach.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about like your journey? 14 years is such a long time. Did you see the red flags early, or was it later on that you started to put things together and realize what you were in?
Yeah, 14 years is a long time.
Yeah.
I usually get a lot of comments about how did you stay for so long? Why didn't you see the red flags? And I think it's important for people to know that red flags are within us as well. So it's how we feel about a specific situation. For me personally, it was really hard for me to see any red flags because I was young. I met him when I was 22 years old. And so I didn't see, you don't know what you don't know. So I would say in hindsight, for sure, hindsight is 2020. Hindsight is where I was able to pick up some of these red flags and go, that's something. But when you're in the moment, it's really hard to see. I would say that the very first thing that I noticed, even just in my healing journey, was I felt very different. Like I was almost dating two different people. So my story is the narcissist that I dealt with, or the toxic person in my life, was a romantic person. And so romantic relationships is something that I normally talk about, but we also have to understand that there's narcissistic abuse that exists in other dynamics. For me, it was someone I was dating, eventually married. And when you are looking at a person and you don't know who they are anymore, where even in the beginning, they're really nice to you in front of other people. And when you're at home alone, they're a little different. That is one blaring red flag that a lot of people just don't really notice, right? It's, they're so generous and they're so kind and they're talking you up and they're praising you in front of all of your family members and friends. But alone, they're not like that. So one thing to look for is consistency. Are they the same person with you and the same person when they're with other people?
Yeah. So what you started to notice was that the person that you had inside and the person that you were watching like exist in the world outside, they were two different. And that was something that you started to realize that something just feels off here.
Yeah. That would be just being like, we talk about this in this mental health space about cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
So cognitive dissonance, just its own definition of it is two competing thoughts existing in your mind. In the simplest term, two competing thoughts existing in your mind. So you've got, the narcissist says, I love you, but then they're cheating on you. So you're thinking, what? Who is this? What is this? Right? But it's more than that. It's two competing people.
Yeah.
It's two competing relationships. You're dealing with Jekyll and Hyde. And that confusion, which creates that cognitive dissonance, is probably the biggest, most blaring red flag that gets peppered in throughout the whole relationship.
Yeah. So the Jekyll and Hyde thing is actually something that I wrote down for us to kind of talk about today as we talk about like the red flags that we start to realize, the red flags within us, which I love that you pointed out. And also, I think like what people just don't understand, society doesn't understand of what we, like the survivors, are dealing with and what we're trying to understand and wrap our minds around as we heal through it. And to touch on the Jekyll and Hyde, I experienced a very similar thing in my relationships. I've had a few of these, unfortunately. And what I realized was that when I was noticing the Jekyll and Hyde happen, I immediately internalized it as, this is me. It's my fault. I must be seeing it wrong. He must actually be this great person out in the world. If you have a client that comes to you and is kind of struggling with that, what do you help them see? Because I think once we start to see it clearly, it's so clear. It's like, no, this person is one person on the outer world and one person behind closed doors. It's just hard to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what it is? It is the blame game. A lot of us will blame ourselves for not seeing it. And then we're blaming ourselves for not making it click. And you touched on something really important, which is that clarity is so important. It's huge in our healing. In order for us to feel a specific way where we can move forward and feel good in a scenario where we're confused, we have to see it clearly, as you mentioned. So clarity is the biggest thing. Knowing and the knowledge that this person is playing different roles. Like they're playing one way with people around and they're playing another way. They're playing one way when they're trying to manipulate you and get you to stay in the relationship so they can perpetually abuse you. And then they're playing this role when their mask takes off and they're annoyed with something you did, or they're giving you attitude for no reason and you're getting the silent treatment. You're getting punished for them not getting their way. So you have to understand that they're playing two different roles to confuse you, and you're mad at yourself for being confused. You're mad at yourself for not seeing it. A lot of my clients, and all of us here healing, we're smart people. We can see things in the world. We have common sense. We have empathy. And there's this one part of us in this relationship where we don't feel very intuitive. We don't feel like we understand or are aware of what's going on. And that can be a huge struggle for us to deal with. So knowing that this is being manipulated and manufactured in us, that awareness can help us heal and move forward and actually see it for what it is. It's a game that they're playing with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're losing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often tell people, like, if you feel confused all the time and you don't feel that way in your everyday life, but in this relationship, you feel confused all of the time, that's a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're finding yourself that, like, if someone's telling you you can't communicate but you communicate all day and you communicate beautifully and like no one else seems to have this problem, but this one person, like you're feeling all these feelings in interaction with them, then that is something to pay attention to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, we blame ourselves. So it will turn into like, well, no, it's us. It's like, I must not be seeing this clearly when it's like, wait, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's really gaslighting. In essence, they're changing your reality so that you feel like you're the problem. You're not seeing things clearly. I'm the same person you got together with when we first met. I haven't changed. You're seeing me differently. It's your eyes, not me. You know, and they'll put that all on you, and we tend to take the blame.
Yeah. Do you remember how you were able to resolve that cognitive dissonance within yourself and start to see the Jekyll and the Hyde clearly?
You know, for me, it was really understanding my emotions and feeling when I was anxious and why. And so when I started going to therapy, one of the tools that I picked up and learned in like cognitive behavioral therapy was to take a situation and do what's called a mental health snack. So, you know, we're hungry, we take a snack.
Mm-hmm.
And snack is an acronym. So it was stop, notice, accept, be curious, be kind. So I would stop for a second and then I'd notice what's happening in my body. If I was starting to get anxious, if I was starting to feel confused, I would really get in on those emotions and identify them. Then I would accept that that's happening to me. I would accept this is the situation and this is my reality right now is I'm feeling very anxious. I'm feeling very confused. I'm also in angst, wishing that he would be back to, you know, to Jekyll. It's like, Jekyll, me and Jekyll forever. I love him. He's so sweet and kind. Like, I wish Hyde would just go away.
Yeah.
So I was very accepting of that as how I felt. And then I was curious, where is this coming from? How long did this cycle last? How long has he been Dr. Hyde? How long have I had to deal with this? Like, how is it affecting me? And I'm curious about it. And then I'm kind to myself throughout this. So really down regulating my emotion around that confusion and that anxiety really helped me see it. It didn't really break the cognitive dissonance, but it helped me to treat it in the moment for the time being, because we're so spiked in cortisol and stress. We're not supposed to be stressed out like that 24/7. It's supposed to just be like when you're about to get into a car accident, or if you're about to jump off a building, like, you know, or skydiving or something, you know, you have this adrenaline rush, you have a little bit of cortisol and then it dissipates. But with a narcissist or toxic situations, we're in it all the time. It's like walking on eggshells 24/7. So the strategy, this mental health snack, helped me just calm myself for the moment so that I could buy some more time and not be stressed like permanently, you know, because it feels like it's permanent.
That is such an important point, because my training, it's a narcissistic and emotional abuse, but it's from a trauma-informed lens. And in it, when we learned about the brain, it talks about like when we're in those trauma responses, like you said, like this one is basically like when you're so anxious and that's how you're thinking, it's like you're in your trauma response, the rationale part of your brain is turned off. And that activity, the mental health snack, really allows you just to calm everything down. Even just for a moment, you're able to like tap into the rationale and just take a pause so that you probably won't act on impulse, but you'll be like, okay, I don't know what to do, but I know I'm not just going to react or stay in my trauma response, but to allow myself to begin to ungaslight myself. Like, you don't know you're doing that at the time, but that's really what that is starting to ungaslight and be a little bit more in the reality.
Yeah, it's really important. We don't realize how much in the unreality we live in. And it's not even something that we're conscious of. And I don't even know if the narcissist is conscious of manufacturing that in us. I think that they do it to survive. They do it because it supplies them. They do it because they get some satisfaction and bliss from that because of their own need for things. And they don't realize they're doing it, but it creates like this blame and guilt and shame for us because we're like, well, how come we can't see it? Like, why are we so confused? Like everywhere else in my life, I feel so clear. Why can't I gain clarity in this aspect? It's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're touching on something that I wanted to talk about with you. And I think it's really important about like how we start to cope, but we don't realize that it's like an unhealthy coping mechanism because it's just sort of our learned survival behaviors. The
Mm-hmm.
things that I've heard from clients and even things I've done for myself are when the narcissist comes home, jumping off the couch, pretending to look busy and like not, that we're not resting or anything like that, I've pretended that I was asleep. When they come home, if I was home before, or hiding my phone, there's like little behaviors that we do to basically say like, don't look over here. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that you've experienced some of them in in 14 years, but also that your clients have too. What are some common like unhealthy coping mechanisms that we do just to avoid the
Mm-hmm.
narcissist?
Yeah. And I think that this is really important to talk about because we think they're coping mechanisms, right? We think
Yeah.
what we're doing is we're coping, but what we're actually doing is surviving.
Yeah.
This isn't a codependency issue. Like there are some of us survivors that struggle with codependency. We need the narcissist to be in a good mood in order for our good mood to exist. But this is more survival. We're not trying to please them. We're actually trying to survive around them because we were conditioned to think that everything we do is wrong. No matter what we do is wrong. So we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't, right? So if we have good news, we can't share it with them because they could be upset or jealous with us. If we have bad news, we can't share it because they're going to blame us for being a drama queen or a drama king or trying to create chaos in their life or, bring down their mood. So everything we do is wrong. So we're literally walking on eggshells, trying not to crack a little shell, trying not to disturb them, bother them. Because if we cry, the last time we cried, they were thinking we were manipulating them or they would get mad at us for crying or make fun of us and we would feel even worse about ourselves. If we walked through the door in a happy mood, they would accuse us of something that we were doing, deceptive towards them. If we made the dinner wrong or loaded the dishwasher wrong, or if we were 5 minutes late or 5 minutes early, we just don't know what would be on the other end of that. We don't know what's going to open up. So we're literally hyper vigilant and expecting abuse to be on the horizon.
Yeah.
That is a survival mechanism, right? We're not just coping. Yeah, we're coping, but we're also just trying to survive. And that becomes this real, like, exhausting fight and flight survival mode that's constant. And this is why a lot of us are tired. This is a lot of reason why we're so exhausted because not only are we walking on eggshells, but we've got this mental load and all of the things we have to think about and filter. Like how many of us have never felt comfortable around a narcissist? Like sitting in front of your car and waiting to go inside is you trying to get your body comfortable because you know it's going to be completely uncomfortable walking in. And that is a huge red flag and a really big sign that you're in something toxic. When you can't pick up the phone and share your good news with the person you're with, like you're not excited to call them and say, hey, I got a promotion at work. That's a huge red flag because that means your discomfort is heavier than the comfort you have in that relationship.
It's also a giant red flag if you're afraid to call them because you need help or you're having a bad day because they're going to make it worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So either way, you have to filter everything you say. You have to filter everything you communicate. And you're constantly questioning. A lot of us just don't even communicate anymore because we just don't know what we're going to get on the other end. It's not familiar. It's very unpredictable.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of like standing by your car and waiting to go in because you can trust what's there, but you can't trust what's inside. And that's something I remember doing all the time where I would basically like have my moment of peace in the car. And then when I felt ready, I would go in and I would always come up with an excuse like, oh, there's traffic or, oh, I just made a quick phone call. I always had something prepared because that was my me time. And at the time, when I look back now, I never even knew what I was doing. I just thought, well, I'll just do this. This seems easier. I don't even know that I had like the mental space to even see I'm doing this to keep myself safe or to like have my moment or like it's not safe inside. Like I couldn't think that far. I could later on, but at the time I was so like everything was so blurry. And you said something about the mental load. And I think that's so important because I'm sure you experience this with your clients. I certainly experience this with mine, that when they come to me, they'll say something like, I'm sorry, I'm just talking so much. I'm like, no, you're not talking too much. Like, this is you getting it out, and like,
Yeah.
and I know exactly what I've been there. So I get it, but it's like that first time that they're even processing what they're thinking and saying, because it's just been stored up there for so long.
And the apologies,
Yeah.
we're always, especially in our very first like baby stages of healing, we are apologizing for everything. And we have to over-explain things. And then we apologize for over-explaining it, because how many times did you over-explain it with the narcissist? Because they just are so committed to misunderstanding every word you say that you have to like take them down a rabbit hole of a story just to say something like, I was 5 minutes late for this.
Right. Exactly.
Getting to the point and saying, oh, I'm 5 minutes late, or this happened. We are so conditioned to have to over-explain it because they don't understand us. And then when we over-explain it, we're talking too much, and now we have to apologize for it. So yeah, there's a lot bubbling up in our minds when we're healing from this. The mental load is huge, and processing it with somebody that finally understands it and finally gets it is really foreign to most of us.
Yeah. And you just reminded me of like when you're with the narcissist and you're trying to explain something and then over explaining and then defending your perspective, and, then like trying not to be gaslit by their perspective. Next thing you know, it's 4 hours into a conversation. You're getting blamed that the conversation went on for 4 hours. You're terrified to talk.
Yeah.
You just become so terrified to even talk about anything at all. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah, you shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. It's funny when they do that to us, because here's the thing that we have to remember is they know exactly what we're saying. They are understanding every word we're saying. They just don't like what they're hearing.
Yeah.
So they will run you around in circles, and, the term word salad, where they're going to add a lot of different, grab different parts of the conversation and take you on different trips everywhere, so that you are now lost focus. You've lost focus of what you were talking about, and you've lost focus of the conversation. And now the point is, there is no point. The point is, you've been talking for 4 hours, and now you're the one to blame for it. So that's what they do. They know everything you're saying. They're just trying to get you to be exhausted talking about it.
And I think that that's another like internal red flag we can look out for, is that if we are becoming exhausted in every conversation, and that if every conversation ends with, I'm just going to stop talking because there's no point, we really need to look at that within ourselves and ask ourselves, like, what is actually happening? And how are we getting here?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really about looking at effective communication.
Yeah.
The one thing that we can always expect from a narcissist is that they're very ineffective in communicating with you.
Yeah.
In every way.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I wanted to lean into some of the red flags that we see in a narcissist, that we might not pick up on, but they're pretty consistent. And I was trying to think of ones that are not always like the ones that we typically talk about, of like, oh, can be amazing at work and so successful, but at home, like, he gets into all these disagreements. Like, I was thinking more about like how they would show up in areas of our life that would trigger us and that we would learn to accept. And one of them, the first one that came to mind last night when I was like kind of going through this, was about the narcissist always having a tantrum on days that are important to us. And I know this happens on holidays, and this can happen, on bigger events, but I think it also happens on like our work parties, or our birthday, or our best friend's wedding, like days that are really important to us, that they're not the center of attention.
That's what it is. They exactly hit the nail on the head. It's when they're important to us.
Yeah.
They know something is up with you. They know that you've got something that is your own thing. It's a sign of your independence, and they don't like that. They want you to be dependent on them. They want you to need them. Here's the thing that narcissists will never tell us. They need us more than we need them. They really need us. So the second you don't need them, the second you've got a speech that you have to prepare for, you're the maid of honor at your best friend's wedding, you've got a big presentation that you're ready to present at work, you're planning your birthday party, something that's important in your life that gives you a sense of you don't need them. They're going to do one of two things. They'll do both. They're going to come on in and say, hey, let me help you with that. Or how's that speech coming along? They're going to get themselves involved so that they're relevant. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing is they're going to mess it up. On the day of your presentation at work, they're going to be calling you with all sorts of problems at the house. Oh, I need you to come home. Like, I've got this presentation in 20 minutes. My boss and everyone's sitting in the boardroom waiting for me. Why are you calling me right now? What's the emergency? Oh, there's a cat ran up the tree next door. Like, it's going to be something to create chaos in your life so that the focus is back on them. And we often think about the times where they ruin celebrations, they ruin birthday parties, and they ruin these holidays. But these are little subtle ways that it looks so innocent. It looks like they're just trying to tell you about something that's going on at the house. Oh yeah, it's your presentations in 20 minutes. Oh, I forgot. No, they don't. They actually know what they're doing. They're wanting to ruin that for you so that you're on their mind and not what you're focused on.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the last time I had a court date with my ex-husband, my boyfriend at the time, who I would identify as a narcissist. I remember he just like ghosted me pretty much like the afternoon before and then the morning before. He reemerged like later that day and was like, oh, sorry, I just wasn't feeling well. And I'm like, oh, what? Like you knew how big this was for me. Anybody who's in this world and they have court dates with their ex, like they know how big those are, especially if you have, the kids. It's like, it's so hard. It's so draining. It's so difficult. And it's like, what do you mean you didn't feel well? Like you couldn't send one text. Were you dead? Were you in the hospital? Did you die and you came back to life? And now you can send what is wrong with you? It's like just to make me, I think, on edge, anxious because the attention was all on me. I was being my best self. When I look back on that, I was like, okay, my T's were crossed and like my I's were dotted and I was prepared and I was like going in and I felt proud of like the me that was going to be going to this thing. And he probably couldn't handle that, even though it had nothing to do with him.
No, he didn't want to be in this space where he's not relevant, where it's not about him, right? You've got this, you've got a plan, you're at the top of your game, you're prepared. Yeah. And then
it has to do with my kid. So that means like I'm untouchable.
Yeah. Mama bear's coming in.
Yeah.
Like, they don't like that. They don't want to have the focus not on them. And they want to make sure that they'll tap into your deepest insecurity. So you might have told them that when you disappear, it bothers me. Or
totally.
You might have had if we have abandonment issues or if we have trauma around certain attachments and he knows or they know that we get anxious about a specific thing, that's what they'll weaponize when they want to get control of you again, when they want to get you emotionally attached. They'll do the thing that they know you're afraid of.
Yeah.
And so that's why he's like, oh, I wasn't feeling good. I'm just going to ghost you here because I know that you have abandonment issues. And I know that when you need the support and you don't get it, when I disappear on you, that's going to make you anxious. So that's what he wanted to do to you. That was like, they don't realize, I don't know if they realize, but they are doing something that they know is going to hurt you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I probably have like 300 more of like similar examples of just a similar thing happening that hit the exact wound that I have and that caused a reaction out of me, which is probably exactly what he wanted.
Yeah, they tap that wound. You tell them a wound about yourself. You tell them a trauma, a trigger, any kind of insecurity, and they will keep it in their back pocket and use it later. And when they do, they're going to take that wound and they're going to put salt in it and just dig inside there. They're going to get you. That's what they do.
Yeah. Well, it actually reminds me of something that happened. So I do have abandonment wounds. I grew up in, I've talked about this on my podcast. I grew up in an abusive home and a physically, emotionally abusive home. And I do have abandonment issues because I was abandoned at such an early age, essentially, like emotionally abandoned and then physically abandoned. So I've been working on that literally my whole life. Once I was old enough to get myself into therapy, I got myself into therapy with a therapist that I believed in, I guess, like that would help me. It wasn't like my mom sending me to therapy to stop acting out. It's like, I'm choosing to go do this because I want to get the hell out of this life that I'm in right now. And, and I moved out early and I kind of recreated my life in a lot of ways. And my ex, who was not anywhere near me during this time, like I met him, like 3 years ago, we dated for a year. He had nothing to do with any of this like long story. He would even get his mom and other people to be like, well, when you date someone, they can't solve your issues for you from your past. I'd be like, what? Like, why am I being gaslit by everybody? Like,
Oh, it's
like,
so funny.
so it's like now my story that like, I'm kind of proud of like the growth that I've had is now, it's like taken, it's twisted, it's like spoon fed to somebody else. And now they're spitting it back on me to basically be like, well, a partner can't solve, your life story. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
A lot of that is really telling. When you
Yeah.
really listen to some of the things they say, when it's confusing like that, I've done this a lot with just decoding my old emails and text messages and really diving into some of the things that really confused me at the time. And now I really realize that narcissists confess to you all the time. They tell the truth on themselves all the time without them knowing it. They say something which actually is something about them, but they say it about you. So there's like, okay, I'll give you an example. One of the times, so I dated two narcissists. I was married to one and then I dated another one immediately after.
Me too.
And yeah, it's so common, right? It sucks because it's funny because the one that I was married to, everything that he didn't give me, I got from the new guy. And the new guy, the red flags, which were the love bombing and the very obvious mirroring and praising me and falling for me so quickly, those kinds of things made me feel really good because I was devalued for so many years and I was deprived of that affection and attention. And I all of a sudden got it from another toxic person. So it was really like, be kind to yourself, anyone who's listening to this, if this has ever happened to you, because it's very common. But he said to me something when we were fighting. He said, Ro, you can't just throw around the word love whenever you want to get your way. And I was like, what? What does that mean? I'm not throwing around the word love. Like, I'm not trying to get my way. I'm trying to get my point across. Like, but that was something he confessed about who he was. He used the word love to manipulate. He used the word love to try to get his way, which was to get me. And so when you listen to these narcissists, when they accuse you of something, you can't just have a relationship to fix your trauma from the past. Like, yeah, they're drawing on something specifically, but that's what he's doing, right? He's using relationships to try to put band-aids on some of the areas of his life he hasn't worked on. And that's what a lot of narcissists do, is they've never worked on their own traumas. They've never worked on how to regulate their own emotions or even identify them. So they're just going to put them all on you. And then make it like it's your fault, that you're the one experiencing that, not me. So the way they accuse you of things, it's usually the truth. Accusations are their own confessions.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so from looking at your content, you've actually posted a lot about a narcissist accusing, in some of your skits, a narcissist accusing you of cheating or being accused of cheating. And so I typically have always seen that as a confession too. Like if you're so nervous about who I'm texting, you definitely have something going on. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, they're specific. They're really specific with their accusations. And when they are, it's usually something they've done. It's usually something that they've specifically done. This is the way the mind of a narcissist works. And it's very similar to how our brain works too. If we see the good in people because we're good people, we're going to hope for them to be good. The potential in them is, if I'm able to be this good person, you can be that good person too. On the flip side of that, when a narcissist does all the crazy stuff they do, they think you're doing it too. Because they live in the reality of, this is my reality. This is how I live. I live in this non-reality. Like, we have to remember that narcissism is kind of a delusional disorder. They live in a non-reality. And so when they're playing all these little narc games, hiding stuff around the house or throwing away clothes that they don't like you wearing, or just trying to make you literally feel crazy, they're thinking you're doing it too. So when they step outside of a relationship and they are entitled to other people and cheat on you, they're going to think you're doing the same thing. And especially if they feel threatened by you or they feel jealous or envious of you in any way, they believe their feelings are facts. So it's like, if I feel jealous because my partner's looking at the Starbucks barista, then I must feel something that's a fact. They must be sleeping together. They must be in their mind. That's what they think. So they're like, okay. What they don't realize is they have some deep shame about sleeping with somebody else or cheating on you with somebody else. They have that. And the guilt comes up but they can't identify it. They don't know how to feel it or process it. So they turn that guilt into a justification. They say, okay, I'm jealous because she's looking at the barista. They must be sleeping together. So that's a fact now. So I can continue to sleep with this person. Now I'm going to accuse her of doing it though. So if I can accuse her of it, then that means that it absolves my own guilt for doing it to her. Like
Exactly.
that's the backwards way they think is so crazy. So one of the things I've really recognized now is like, if you're being accused of something, they want you to react. They want you to defend yourself. They want you to argue the point and try to explain it away. But what they're really doing is they're just trying to get you all riled up so that they don't have to explain what they're doing to you. It's always a confession.
Yeah. And then usually you're so thrown off by the accusation because you're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I didn't do that. Like, I literally just ordered a coffee. Like, what is that?
Like, yeah, he's like 10, 20 years younger than me. Like, what are you talking about? Right. Like, you have to actually take a step back and respond to these accusations, and reacting to the accusation is exactly what they want you to do. They want you to react to it because the more you're in reaction, the more you're processing more emotions, and the more emotions bubble up in you, and anxieties and insecurities and confusion. And the narcissist wants you to be there, wants you to live in that space because it allows them to be free of that space.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they're kind of off the hook too at that point.
Yeah.
They're like, all right, well, you're clearly doing it. And you're like, well, I'm not doing anything.
The focus is now on you, and I can go and do whatever I want, right? They also get to clear it off their conscience because it's almost like they did confess it.
Yeah.
By accusing you of it.
Right.
So they're not holding on to that anymore. It's wild. It's wild when you think about it.
You touched on this early on when you said post-separation abuse. I typically think about that in co-parenting relationships, but when you are in this scenario, I mean, I've dealt with this with tons of clients. I've also kind of went through this in my own life and my own story of after the separation and after like what we would call the discard, it's like, well, when they come back, they want to come back whenever they feel like they can come back. If the access is there, if they can. And it's like all of these things are all of this like, oh, I just can control and manipulate it and like try and get you to see that you were the problem. It comes right back so quickly. Can you touch a little bit on post-separation abuse?
Yeah, the post-separation abuse, it's really prevalent, especially in any kind of like, there's 3 ways a narcissist traps you: marriage, kids, and legal or any kind of financial tie. So if you buy a house together, if you get married, if you have kids, and those 3, sometimes all 3 happen. And when they break that trap, like you break out of the trap, they have to have some way to control you. So the post-separation abuse comes with like you are attached to this person in some sort of legal way. Like there's some sort of document that attaches you to them. And they use that to continue to abuse you. They know that they've broken down that connection or the cycle that you were involved in. So they might not be able to hoover you back into the relationship, but they sure as heck is going to threaten you with legal abuse, or they will give you a lot of crazy different threats that aren't going to happen, but they might tap into your insecurities and threaten you that way. They'll verbally abuse you. They might even stalk you. They might be monitoring you and showing up on all of your accounts even after you've blocked them. They're going to emotionally abuse you. They're going to start maybe using, if you'd have kids in the middle of it, they're going to start using the kids to triangulate abuse towards you and start to say things to the kids which they'll repeat it back like a parrot back to you and tap into your own insecurities as a parent, make you feel inadequate and that you're not a good parent. There's going to be so many different ways that they're going to try to control you again and your emotion. It doesn't always show up as they want to get back together with you. They want to confuse you even more and make you feel like everything was your fault.
And that you can't be with anybody else. We always say that no contact is really the only way to end this, especially like if you don't have one of those attachments, the legal, the kids, or the ones that you said. And I think it's like, if we don't go no contact, if they still have access to us, then they will also not want us to be with anybody else.
They're really going to sabotage that as much as they can. They don't want you to be happy. There's a thing about the ownership that happens in an abusive relationship, in a narcissistic relationship, is the minute they feel like they own you, they've owned you for life.
Yeah.
And if you try to move on from it, they're going to be like, no, that's mine. That's my toy. Even though I don't want it anymore, even though I've discarded it and I abuse it, that's mine. No one else can play with it. I want to keep that toy forever. So I'm going to be really upset if somebody plays with it. And so, yeah, they see you dating somebody else, or they see you moving on with your life and succeeding without them, and they're no longer relevant anymore. They're going to make sure they're relevant by trying to mess it up for you and really making you feel really uncomfortable. It's a violation to you because you can feel their presence around you. You can feel them trying to mess things up, even if it seems innocent. They're doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody can't go no contact because of having one of those ties to them, what would you recommend to someone who they notice that's happening? Like that the narcissist feels like they own them, but they want so desperately to move on and to be able to have a new relationship and the freedom that they obviously deserve. What are your recommendations?
So there's also low contact.
Yeah.
So there are ways that you can still communicate with the narcissist. You might have to share your children with and try to co-parent, which I believe more in parallel parenting.
Yeah.
But having low contact and really keeping things short and sweet, using the BIF method, which is brief, informative, friendly, and firm, and using methods that remove emotion from your communication. So you're not letting them get into you, into your psyche, getting into your insecurities. You're just kind of aware that what they're saying is that of a toddler voice, like they're just trying to get a reaction out of you. So really just knowing that. Another thing is having the self-care and self-love focused back on you again. You know, we tend to stop taking care of ourselves, and we tend to put all the focus on our threats and what's coming at us and what's attacking us. And that's just really living in chaos. We have no choice but to do that because the narcissist always wants to put chaos in our life. So in order for us to remove chaos and start focusing back on us, we have to put peace in our life. We have to do things that show us and show up for our own selves in love. So whatever self-care acts you can do, fill our own bucket of self-love. And we're now focused on us. We focus less on the narcissist. So it does a bunch of things, like emotionally and mentally, we do go no contact. Maybe communication has to still be open, but the no contact starts from within. It means that this person, if they're contacting us, it doesn't matter. They're nobody to us. We get to a place where we're indifferent. We don't hate them. We don't miss them. We don't love them. We're not sad about them. We're not resentful. We just don't care. They're like the gas station attendant or the mailman. They're just nobody to us. And that's a really high, superior way to be no contact, is that you're no contact in your mind. You're no contact in your heart, in your soul. It's not about blocking them. And you can get to that place when you can block them. But it's about you don't even care if they contact you. Doesn't even matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when no contact is hard, something I recommend to people is to just find ways that you can limit the contact as much as you can and set boundaries that you know are huge for you. You know, it doesn't matter what, somebody on TikTok says or like what I might do or your best friend would do. It's just like, think about like what would be such a huge step for you. So if you only respond to one message a day, and before you responding to everything as it came because you were terrified, that's such a huge jump, So just to think about like how you can stretch it out to start to show yourself like, oh my God, it actually feels really amazing to not live in chaos.
Yeah, I love that. Having a boundary that starts from like step-by-step process. You start with like limiting, and then you go from like, okay, I'm going to respond only one time a day, or I'm going to only read the messages one time a day, or even just changing the name in the phone to your kid's dad instead of saying their name so that it's less of a trigger, but doing little things that help you cope through whatever trigger comes up whenever they try to contact you. I really love that because it gives you this space of like baby steps. Like you're not going cold turkey right away, but you're like moving towards that and practicing.
Yeah. And that's where you want your brain to get to.
Yeah. I used to send emails. I would read an email from my ex-husband and I would go through every single sentence and respond to every single one. I'd have a response to every single sentence, every single paragraph. Okay, to this. Okay, this money, but this was this. And okay, now I have to address this. And it would be long emails. Now, let's fast forward 1 year later from then, I would read the email and I would look and see what it had to do with the kids. And I would only respond to that. I would just ignore everything else.
Yeah, I work with a lot of people in like post-separation abuse and responding. And I did the same exact thing you said. I was like, okay, well, this is a theory that he has that I have to debunk. And now this thing is that I have to respond to. And then this is about the child. So I'm going to make this really long and forward. And then this is an accusation against me and I need to reply to that. And it'd be like, when I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, out of these 6 paragraphs, there's literally one item about the kid. And that's what I'm responding to.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
yeah.
you know, I would get pushback on that too. It would be like, how you didn't say anything about Saturday.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I still didn't get a response on that $500. Well, yeah, because it's BS.
Yeah.
I don't owe you $500. Like I got to a point where I'm like, even though he's asking and he's pushing a little bit, like, hey, you didn't respond to this. He's slowly being conditioned, slowly getting trained. I'm teaching him what my boundaries are. I'm teaching him how he's allowed to speak and communicate with me. No, I'm not going to address things that are relevant to our parenting situation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And in a non-parenting situation, I think that could look like somebody is texting you and you're trying to say, get your items back. And they keep bringing up all these issues that they have with you. It's like, okay, so I'm going to come on Saturday and pick up, my stuff. Please leave it out. And if you don't, I'm just going to grab it. I'm going to leave. And then it's like, yeah, but you and this, and it's like, okay, Saturday 4, it's like continuing just to be like really focused on the issue. It takes some time to get there and to like get your brain there, but remembering what the focus is so important.
So important. Practice makes perfect. You just keep sticking to your guns. You keep doing it in the same format and have awareness and acceptance that you're going to get pushback. And they're going to be a little taken aback by it. They're going to be like, why is this person emailing me this way and ignoring all of my demands? Then they'll eventually get to a place where it's like, okay, this is how they communicate now. I have to deal with it. Yeah.
So I know that we're getting close to time and I want to make sure that we are able to share what you do. I really appreciate you talking to me today. I loved talking to you and talking through all the red flags. And also just how we can deal. Like that's really where I think this podcast ended up falling is like, how can we begin to see and clear out our heads so that we can deal with what's happening and move forward?
Yeah.
Can you share like how people can find you?
Yeah. So I am on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. My handle is _rollercoaster of love. And I do create content on all platforms. And I also have a podcast on Spotify, Real Talk with Ro, that you can find on Spotify. So what I normally do is I have a few things. So I do coaching. I'm a certified life and relationship coach. A lot of my clients that book with me, they find me online. They find me through my content. I help people with exit strategies, which is one of the biggest things right now is after the holidays, there's a lot of people who are realizing they're in abusive relationships and they need to get out.
Yeah.
And biggest thing I focus on there is the harm reduction and making sure that when you do get out and you're planning on getting out, you do it strategically so that you're not in any danger because sometimes these can be pretty dangerous situations that you're leaving. So I help people with that, help people with healing, and also help people build community within each other because a lot of us get isolated once we're in these relationships, whether it's physical isolation or even just mental and emotional, because it feels like we can't talk to anybody about this.
Yeah.
So creating community is one of the biggest things that I focus on as well. But yeah, you can find me _rollercoaster of love on all platforms.
Can you just touch on quickly the group coaching that you do? Yeah, I see it every time you post it on Instagram, but I think like when you said community, I was like, that's
community. Yes.
That can be such an amazing thing. Even if someone goes on there and they don't say anything, just to like listen to other people hearing like, oh my God, like that person sounds just like me.
Yeah. So I always say this, I believe that healing from this kind of abuse takes 3 things, takes 3 pillars of healing. One is education. One is the knowledge and awareness that we learn about what we went through. The second one is self-love and self-care, which we sort of touched on, really just filling your bucket and putting the focus back on you. And then the third thing is community. And that's from the sense of, we lost ourselves and we lost community from isolation. So all of those 3 things you get in group coaching. I run a monthly group coaching session and it is on Sundays at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. The next one I have is on March 26th and it hosts up to 25 people on a Zoom call. And 2 things happen in those meetings. One is when you share your story, you might help somebody else thrive, somebody else have clarity, and somebody else in their healing, something might click for them. Because how many of us have resonated with another person's story? It's almost like some of us have said we've did we date the same person? Did we live the same life? Right. So you get that sense of community. You get that sense of validation in another person by hearing it. And then you might hear something yourself, right? You might hear something that clicks for you that you've never heard before because of somebody else's sharing. So in sharing, we help people have validation because you're never going to get that from the narcissist. You're never going to get closure. And the closure comes from within and it comes from your community. So you do get all three of those things in my group coaching. And you can find that also on the links in all of my bios.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll be sure to post the link to the next one in the show notes. So if somebody wants to sign up, they can easily go and find it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, that was amazing.